What if I told you the Cleveland Browns might lose their locker room, their season, and their future, all because of a quarterback who isn't even playing? Shedeur Sanders is listed as QB3 on the depth chart. He hasn't started a regular season game. He's barely taken a snap with the first team. And yet, his name alone is setting off a chain reaction inside the Browns organization that looks more like a reality show meltdown than an NFL locker room. Coaches are cracking. Vets are leaking stories. Players are starting to whisper the one thing you never want floating through a professional roster. They don't know what they're doing. And here's the wildest part. The locker room isn't just frustrated, it's furious. Reports say Cleveland's safe space, that inner sanctum where game plans are protected and trust is sacred, is leaking worse than a roof in a thunderstorm. Day after day, new details pour out to insiders. Coaches playing favorites, reps going to quarterbacks that won't even make the roster. A first-round talent treated like a practice squad tryout. It's chaos, cloaked in khakis. One player even described it as a circus, not a team, a reality show with shoulder pads. And at the center of it, staring quietly from the sideline, is Sanders. He hasn't said a word publicly. He shows up, works, watches. But that silence, it's louder than any touchdown celebration. The tension he draws from coaches, the loyalty he draws from teammates, the conversation he sparks in every media room. It's deeper than stats. This isn't just about reps. This is about resentment, mismanagement, and fear. Because what Shedeur represents isn't just raw talent. It's exposure. If he plays and performs, the front office has to answer for why he was buried. If he plays and outshines the veterans, the coaching staff has to explain why reps were wasted. If he plays and proves them all wrong, suddenly the organization doesn't look misinformed. It looks incompetent. That's why the Browns haven't unleashed him. Not because he isn't ready, but because they aren't. Now things are spiraling. You have a defense working overtime trying to keep games close, but the offense keeps falling flat. And the locker room knows they've got a Ferrari collecting dust in the garage. Some players are reportedly split. Some think Sanders is being handled just like any rookie. Others are accusing the staff of holding him hostage. Not because they don't believe in him, but because they believe in him too much. Let's be honest, if Shedeur Sanders was just another camp arm, there wouldn't be leaks. There wouldn't be debates about his sunglasses or how he wears his hoodie. There wouldn't be ESPN breakdowns of his sideline demeanor. There wouldn't be panic. But panic is what happens when control starts slipping away. And that's exactly what's happening in Cleveland. The Browns are so afraid of another Baker situation, so scarred from years of misfires at QB, that they're willing to lock away potential just to protect themselves from being wrong again. They don't want another guy lighting it up somewhere else, grinning on Sunday Night Football while the headlines say, "Cleveland let this walk." But here's the irony. They're not preventing that scenario. They're guaranteeing it. Because Shedeur's story is already echoing across the league. Teams are watching. Scouts are circling. One preseason flash was all it took, and now half the NFL is treating Sanders like the best-kept secret in the league. He's basically the unopened gift Cleveland's too scared to unwrap. And the fans? They're tired. The ones who believe in Sanders are calling for heads. The ones who've stayed on the fence are starting to lean. Even the ones who don't like his style can't deny the numbers slipping from the guys playing over him. So the real question isn't, is Shedeur ready to play? The real question is, what are the Browns so afraid of? Because they're acting like the threat isn't opposing defenses. It's their own quarterback. And if that doesn't scream dysfunction, I don't know what does. So in this video, we're breaking it all down. The leaks, the locker room revolt, the coaching panic, and the growing belief that Shedeur Sanders is the most controversial backup in football. Not because of what he's done on the field, but because of what people are terrified he might do if they ever give him the shot. Let's talk about how a third-string QB just became the most powerful man in Cleveland without even taking the field. The Cleveland Browns locker room wasn't supposed to be the story. If there's one place in the NFL that's meant to be off-limits to drama, it's right there, inside those walls where players bleed, bond, and break for each other. It's football's version of a sacred ground. That's where grudges get buried, game plans get installed, and respect is built in silence. But not in Cleveland. Their locker room isn't a safe space anymore. It's a live feed waiting to go viral. Every day, more information leaks. Anonymous player quotes, insider reports, coach frustrations, veteran whispers. What was once tightly sealed has become a full-blown media pipeline, dripping with chaos. And the kicker? It all points back to one name, Shedeur Sanders. Players aren't just talking about him, they're practically rallying around him. Some are furious that he's not playing. Others are confused why a guy with that much talent is being iced out. But everyone in that building feels the tension. And unfortunately, it's starting to spill out in ways no front office can contain. One report described the situation as uncomfortably divided. Another called it mutiny in slow motion. Veterans are side-eyeing the coaches. Young guys are questioning the depth chart. And coaches, they're sweating. Because every time a leak hits social media, it gets harder to sell the idea that they're in control. Here's the thing, locker room loyalty is everything in the NFL. You lose that, and you've already lost the season. And right now, the Browns are dangerously close to losing it all. There's a growing belief among players that Sanders isn't just being benched, he's being sabotaged. That he's not being developed slowly, as some staffers claim. He's being intentionally held back. And that perception, it's poison to a team dynamic. Because if the guys in the locker room feel you're setting up one of their own to fail, the trust breaks instantly. Teammates have reportedly started asking questions that echo through the weight room and sideline chatter. Why hasn't he had first-team snaps? Why bring him here at all, if he's just going to carry a clipboard? How are Flacco and Gabriel getting more opportunity when their ceiling is already known? These aren't just casual questions anymore. They're accusations. And like clockwork, coaches inside Berea are said to be buzzing with frustration. Leaks are coming from all directions, and Stefanski is reportedly over it. He should be. Because once your locker room starts leaking like this, that's not just a coaching issue, it's a credibility crisis. But here's the part no one in that building wants to say out loud. Silence speaks louder than any mic'd-up moment. And while Sanders hasn't lashed out or made demands, his silence has become deafening. The locker room sees it. He's locked in, doing his work, not breaking. And that's the part that really stings for the staff. The fact that they can't pin anything on him. No ego, no outbursts, just a young QB waiting while the building bursts into whispers around him. So now, the Browns locker room is no longer holding a quarterback controversy. They're living inside one. Let's drop the diplomacy and call it what it is. The Browns aren't developing Shedeur Sanders. They aren't easing him into the system, nurturing his play style, or crafting a long-term plan. What they're doing looks a lot more like holding him hostage. Because when a rookie quarterback with first-round traits gets drafted in the 5th, when he gets 0 first-team reps, when veterans are fumbling through starts while he stays buried at QB3, that's not slow development. That's suppression. And no one in the locker room is buying the "we're protecting him" line anymore. Look at the pattern. From the moment Sanders arrived in Cleveland, he's been boxed out. Not rotated in during practice, not tested with the starters, not even getting cleanup time in preseason games. And when he does step on the field, it's behind the third-string offensive line, with vanilla play calls and zero design success. Forget progress. It feels like they're trying to stage a quiet failure. Even some team insiders are starting to admit it off the record. One called it asset protection through inaction. Another bluntly said, they don't want to see him shine, not here. Why? Because they know if Sanders grows into what so many believe he can be, the Browns front office will have to answer one terrifying question. Why wasn't he playing from the beginning? That's the fear, and make no mistake, it is fear behind this entire strategy. Fear of being wrong again. Fear of another Baker Mayfield situation. Fear of finally drafting the right quarterback and watching him make the current regime look incompetent. So instead of building him up the right way, Cleveland locked Sanders in a metaphorical vault. He's on the roster, sure, but he's the quarterback version of a classified document. Too hot to handle, but too dangerous to release. And the fans? They've noticed. They didn't miss the way Kevin Stefanski called conservative plays for Dillon Gabriel. But let Sanders walk into chaos. They saw Sanders getting bottom-of-the-barrel reps against linebackers, trying to make a final roster impression. That's not a fair shot. That's a setup, which is why the narrative has shifted from confusion to cold suspicion. The more people see what's happening, the less it looks like a coaching decision, and the more it smells like franchise self-preservation. Because if they really believed Sanders was just a developmental prospect, they'd give him those tools, reps, film sessions, opportunities with the ones. But none of that's happening. Instead, Cleveland would rather hide him than prove he's ready. And here's the problem with that plan. The whole league is watching. Rival teams are already circling. Scouts have the footage. GMs are monitoring the situation like vultures over a wounded animal. And the longer the Browns drag this out, the more obvious it becomes Shedeur Sanders isn't being mentored, he's being managed. And not for his future, for theirs. The Browns have a head coach, but right now, it looks like they don't have a leader. Kevin Stefanski was supposed to be the calm in the chaos, the guy who kept the locker room in line when tempers flared and narratives spun out of control. But over the past few weeks, he hasn't just lost control of the situation, he started to lose control of the room. Players are leaking, reporters are prying, fans are calling out inconsistencies, and through it all, Stefanski looks like a man trying to pour water on a house fire with a coffee mug. Multiple reports say the pressure inside the facility is nearing a breaking point. Coaches are tense. Assistants are paranoid. Stefanski himself is reportedly frustrated with how much has been leaking to the press, especially anything connected to Shedeur Sanders. But here's the part nobody seems willing to admit. Those leaks aren't happening in spite of Stefanski. They're happening because of him. Because when you keep your locker room in the dark, when guys see questionable decisions day after day, when the player who's running with the threes seems like the best quarterback in the building, they don't just whisper, they speak loudly and they leak. What's worse, Stefanski's credibility has taken hit after hit from his own decisions. He's sidelining Sanders while rotating through a quarterback room made up of a 40-year-old veteran, a third-round rookie, and placeholders. Reports say Dillon Gabriel has received significantly more reps in high-leverage team periods. And not only that, he's receiving better play designs. One former player described it like this. They're letting Gabriel run a tour bus through the defense on 7-yard unders, and they're handing Sanders a scooter and asking him to fly. It's not just about who gets reps, it's about how they're getting used. Meanwhile, Joe Flacco's name is somehow still in the mix, a quarterback who's closer to retirement than relevance. He's being talked about as a bridge while the real construction project sits untouched, collecting dust behind the QB2 clipboard. That's not strategy, that's fear. Internally, people are starting to realize Stefanski isn't just coaching this team, he's protecting his job. And that protection now includes avoiding the one decision that could redefine the future of the franchise, playing Shedeur. Because if Sanders goes out and thrives, everything changes. Not just the season, the narrative. Fans won't care about Stefanski's playbook. They'll ask why it took so long. And Stefanski, smart as he is, knows the risk. He's boxed himself into a corner. Play Sanders and potentially expose everything. Keep him benched and fuel the leaks, the rage, and the risk of losing the locker room entirely. It's a no-win scenario of his own making. And the longer it drags on, the more it looks like the Browns don't need a new quarterback. They need a new plan. Here's the irony Cleveland didn't see coming. By trying to hide Shedeur Sanders, they made him impossible to ignore. They buried him on the depth chart. They gave him scraps in practice. They tossed him into preseason behind third-string linemen and pretend it was a fair test. But when Sanders touched the field, even for a few flashes, you could feel it. NFL scouts felt it too. Quieter than fans, but twice as fast. Front office phones started buzzing. General managers asking, "Who is this kid?" Talent evaluators pulling up college tape. Pro personnel departments revisiting their own draft boards, reevaluating the kid Cleveland thought they could stash. All because, for one brief moment, the Browns slipped up and gave us a glimpse. And when you've got it, that's all a scout needs. One on-the-run dime. One big-time read. One clip that looks like more than a backup getting lucky. And like that, Sanders wasn't just another name. He was suddenly that guy. The late-round pick who fell too far and now raises one burning question league-wide. How did we all miss him? Well, not everyone missed him. The Browns didn't. They knew. That's why they drafted him. But now, they're treating him like a state secret. They've stashed him like a national security threat. You'd think Shedeur's wristband had nuclear codes on it the way Cleveland is guarding him on the bench. Except this is football, and secrets don't last long. Not with 31 other franchises constantly searching for the next spark. That's why the Browns didn't dare risk putting him on the practice squad. The moment they did, GMs would line up like it was Black Friday. One anonymous insider said, if he hit waivers, he'd be gone in 10 minutes and lighting it up in another jersey by next Sunday. So Cleveland didn't cut him, didn't promote him, didn't showcase him. They just locked him in a QB room and hoped nobody would ask questions. It's all fear-based management. He's not QB3 because he lacks talent. He's QB3 because the front office is terrified of being exposed. Because if he plays, and he's good, suddenly everyone else looks bad. The coaches who kept him benched. The scouts who pushed other QB names higher on the draft board. The GM who let public pressure shape depth chart decisions. It's the exact same fear that led to the Baker Mayfield saga. Protect the narrative, not the player. But here's their mistake. You can't hide talent in 2025. Not in the surveillance state that is the modern NFL. Every snap is reviewed. Every skilled backup is tracked by desperate teams. Every mismanaged QB becomes someone else's reclamation project, and often a revenge tour. So while Sanders stays silent and plays the role, the whispers get louder. He looks like a starter. How is this guy not playing? Someone's going to steal him, just watch. And when that happens, whether next month or next year, the Browns can't act surprised. They didn't just fail to develop Shedeur Sanders. They put him in a glass cage, lit a spotlight on him, and dared the entire league to come take a closer look. Spoiler alert, they already are. At some point, frustration turns into a mutiny. But in Cleveland, that moment is already here. It's no longer whispers from the locker room or passive-aggressive tweets from fans. It's leaks, side-eyes, jersey burns, and full-on rebellion, because the people closest to this team have had enough. Players aren't just confused by the Shedeur Sanders situation. They're angry. Reports say the locker room is split, but not down the middle. More like down the throat of the coaching staff. Veterans who've put in years of blood, sweat, and surgeries are watching their offense stall, while a quarterback with real juice stands frozen behind a clipboard. They're watching practice reps go to aging arms and third-round placeholders. They're running routes for guys who miss throws that Sanders hits in warm-ups. And they're asking the only question that matters. Why not let the best guy play? And that question, it cuts deeper than depth charts. It challenges everything about how decisions are being made. When a locker room believes the team is not doing everything possible to win, trust shatters. When they think politics or fear has replaced performance, it spreads like infection. And that's exactly what's happening in Cleveland. One report says players have privately voiced concern to assistant coaches. Another says the divide is growing by the day between those who still believe in the current regime and those who are going through the motions, knowing this season's mission is sabotaged. And if you think the fans are any calmer, think again. Every day, more Browns supporters are turning from loyal to livid. They're not just questioning play calls anymore, they're questioning entire philosophies. Social media is flooded with comments like, "Play Shedeur or lose the city. This is Baker all over again. How are we still wasting talent?" They've watched this cycle repeat too many times. The next big hope arrives, the team hesitates, the player fades or escapes. Then Cleveland presses reset. Again. Some fans are already done. Season ticket holders voicing their exits. Others say they're rooting for Sanders, but against the Browns. That's not just a broken fan base. That's an identity crisis. Even more troubling, there's a growing group who believe this is intentional. They think the franchise is protecting egos, not team success. That Shedeur is being kept inactive because he's good, not in spite of it. And the wildest part? That theory doesn't even sound crazy anymore. Not when you see coaches pushing other quarterbacks with softer criticism, less pressure, and better game scripts. Not when you hear insiders say they don't want the heat of being wrong about him. Not when doing nothing has become the primary strategy. That's why fans are turning. That's why players are venting. They see a quarterback sitting in handcuffs, and they can't find one logical reason why. In most cities, this situation would raise eyebrows. In Cleveland, where quarterback heartbreak is a yearly tradition, it's triggering full-out paranoia. The city sees the talent. The team refuses to use it. And the tension? It's not simmering anymore. It's spilling over. In most NFL cities, Shedeur Sanders can't breathe without it turning into headlines. Forget touchdowns, forget mechanics, forget quarterback IQ. Right now, the most debated part of Shedeur's game isn't on the field. It's on his face. His sunglasses. Yes, really. National talking heads have spent more airtime debating his sideline swagger than his actual snap count. ESPN segments turned into fashion critiques. Social media threads analyzing whether his confidence is too much for a backup. Even local beat writers can't seem to decide if his hat placement is evidence of cockiness or just, existing. Let that sink in. We are in a full-scale quarterback crisis, and somehow it's been downgraded into wardrobe analysis. This isn't football. This is a distraction campaign. And whether intentional or not, it's working, for now. Franchises have done this before, when they don't want the public demanding change. They distract the public, shift the spotlight, twist the narrative. In place of real conversations about his readiness or reps, fans are arguing about whether a pair of designer shades means he's not serious. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If Sanders was your typical fifth-round pick from a small program without swagger, would we still be here? Would tweets dissecting his facial expression mid-huddle be news? Would his sideline smiles be labeled arrogant? Would he be called a diva for hyping up his teammates? Probably not, because this isn't about behavior. It's about image. And Sanders has one. Polished, confident, fashion-forward, and not what Cleveland's front office knows how to handle. They weren't prepared for a quarterback with edge, one with presence, one who's just as composed speaking to the media as he is throwing a dart on third down. So instead of embracing it, they've started leaning into the idea that he's too flashy, too loud, too confident. But let's be honest, if he were winning games right now, that confidence would be iconic. We've seen it before. Joe Burrow shows up in Cartier and fake fur, and he's celebrated as Joe Cool. Cam Newton does it, and it's Maverick mentality. But Shedeur? It's too much drip for a bench player. So what gives? The difference here is that the people in charge didn't choose him to be the face of the franchise. And now that he's emerging as one anyway, they don't know what to do with him. So the media noise becomes a cover. Instead of addressing developmental reps, schemes, or why Joe Flacco is still taking snaps ahead of him, the headlines ask if Sanders wears his hat backward too often. It's laughable, but it's working. It's drowning genuine conversation in garbage takes. But here's the truth Cleveland cannot bury. You can spin narratives, you can distract the media, but you can't hide energy. The locker room sees it, the fans feel it, and the league is already locked in. So talk about sunglasses all you want. Eventually, this kid's gonna step on the field and remind everyone what actually matters. And spoiler alert, it's not what he wore to warm-ups. At this point, Shedeur Sanders isn't just tangled in a quarterback controversy. He's trapped inside a full-blown franchise identity crisis. Because this isn't just about whether he should start or sit. It's about who the Browns are and who they've been for far too long. Let's be blunt. Cleveland has a quarterback problem, not a talent problem. They've drafted talented QBs before. Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, even Deshaun Watson brought a wave of promise the team couldn't manage. The problem hasn't been finding the guy. It's been figuring out what to do with him once he walks in the door. And Shedeur? He walked in with too much momentum, too much confidence, too many expectations the Browns didn't plan for. They wanted a project they could mold. What they got was a player with presence, one who didn't need to be dragged toward leadership. He stepped into it naturally. And instead of leaning into that, the franchise started to retreat. They drafted him with headlines like value pick, then treated him like he had none. They talked about long-term growth, then gave meaningful reps to quarterbacks with 2-year expiration dates. They said competition, but never actually let him compete. Why? Because this team, deep down, is scared. Scared of being wrong again. Scared of playing the wrong guy. Scared of finally being handed something real and fumbling it on national TV. And fear doesn't build consistency. It builds tents, temporary shelters from criticism. And every quarterback Cleveland brings in has to live under one. The moment things get shaky, the reset button is already halfway pressed. The next draft class gets hyped. The fans start looking ahead. The quarterback becomes a storyline, not a solution. We saw it with Baker. One toe out of line, and suddenly, the savior became disposable. We saw it with Watson, brought in under controversy and chaos, and never given a supporting cast that made sense. Now with Shedeur, it's happening again, before he's even played meaningful minutes. That's not leadership. That's organizational panic. The Browns don't just bench players. They bury promise under poor planning and paranoia. And what makes Sanders' story even more frustrating is how predictable it all feels. The fan base knows it too. There's a reason they've already built factions. Some worshiping Shedeur as the future, some tired of the hype, and others sitting in stunned silence, wondering why this always happens. Quarterback after quarterback, they cycle through names like lottery tickets, praying the next one fixes what the last one broke. But here's the truth. No quarterback is fixing anything until the franchise fixes itself. And that starts with identity. Who are the Browns trying to become? A QB factory? A win-now team? A rebuild stuck in permanent preseason? Because right now, they're acting like all three and functioning like none. They say they want a star, but get shook when the spotlight follows. They draft for potential, then put out fires with duct tape and 40-year-old backups. And in the middle of it, watching it all unravel, is Shedeur Sanders. Not the problem, not the threat, just the mirror, reflecting exactly how lost this team has become. The Cleveland Browns aren't just failing to develop Shedeur Sanders. They're unraveling from the top down while pretending it's all under control. Behind closed doors, it's reportedly chaos. A front office walking on eggshells, a coaching staff arguing about reps, assistants stepping on each other's toes. And at the center of it all, a quarterback management plan that feels less like strategy and more like self-protection. Let's be honest, what we're seeing isn't slow development, it's calculated containment. Insiders say Sanders is being kept under wraps, not because he's not ready, but because the organization isn't ready for what happens if he succeeds. They know the second Shedeur lights it up, even just once, the entire blueprint crumbles. The media won't ask, when did he turn the corner? They'll ask, who kept him off the field this long? That kind of success doesn't elevate a team. It exposes the people who held it back. And that's exactly what the Browns are trying to avoid. Reports have surfaced that the front office is pressuring the staff to play it safe, stick to the plan, limit the scrutiny. Translation? Keep the flashy backup quiet and let the veterans soak up the spotlight. Even if it means stalling the growth of the most talented quarterback on the roster. But it's backfiring, and fast. Former players turned analysts are calling out the obvious. If you're trying to protect Sanders by hiding him, you're not protecting anyone. You're sabotaging progression, fan trust, and player buy-in. Even more disturbing, there are whispers of a darker motive underneath all this: protecting egos. Some in Cleveland's decision-making circles reportedly believe playing Sanders now could expose internal disagreements about whether he should have been drafted at all. Instead of building a unified plan, it's become a quiet power struggle. And Shedeur is caught dead in the middle. So what do? Give him the bare minimum reps. Keep him at QB3 regardless of how the others perform. Avoid the media frenzy by feeding narratives like long-term project. And above all, never give him the runway to prove them wrong. They're not trying to develop a quarterback. They're trying to control a narrative. And that narrative is increasingly fragile. Every time a beat reporter drops a practice update about misused reps, every time a teammate leaks frustration about the QB depth chart, every time a highlight clip surfaces of Shedeur making a pro-level throw, the front office loses grip on the story they're trying to sell. They say it's about caution, that they don't want to rush him. But the real reason is far simpler. They don't want to be held accountable if he was the right choice all along. Because if Shedeur thrives, the coaching staff takes the hit. If he struggles, the front office says, see, he wasn't ready. It's a rigged game of optics where the player, once again, carries all the risk. This isn't a rebuild. This is a cover-up. And in the meantime, Shedeur's potential sits untouched, while the building around him melts into dysfunction, misdirection, and finger-pointing. The Browns aren't failing quietly. They're tripping over themselves in broad daylight. And the league is watching every step. It only takes one snap to change a career. One moment to blow the lid off a storyline. And Shedeur Sanders, he's sitting one snap away from turning the entire NFL on its head. Because here's the truth. Beneath the arguments, the leaked reports, the fashion critiques, and the front office smokescreens, everyone sees the same thing. He's not just a backup anymore, he's a bomb waiting for ignition. And the Browns know it. That's why they're terrified to unleash him. It's not that they think he'll fail. It's that deep down, they're afraid he'll succeed. And the second he does, everything changes. The media will erupt. Why wasn't he starting sooner? Fans will demand resignations. The locker room will rally behind their guy and possibly turn their back on the people who held him back. Opposing scouts won't just watch. They'll target, looking for a chance to pry him loose. Because if Sanders gets on a field and delivers what insiders believe he can, his value skyrockets and the Browns lose control of the narrative and the asset. This is bigger than a quarterback controversy. It's a franchise-altering scenario hanging in the balance. And all it takes is an injury, a blowout loss, or a desperate Thursday night gamble to flip the switch. And that's why teams across the league are watching like hawks. Every general manager who passed on Sanders knows it. Every quarterback-needy franchise is circling the situation, just waiting for him to hit free agency, practice squad, or trade talks. The whispers are so loud now, they're basically shouts. He flashes, he's gone. Don't cut him, they'll snatch him immediately. One clip gets out, they'll make a call. He doesn't even have to put up stats. Just give them a glimpse, and that's exactly what happened already. A single drive in preseason. A few tight window throws, a scramble that looked like Russell Wilson prime, a poise that doesn't come from third-string status, and suddenly every scout in the league is on alert. The Browns had one chance to slide him in quietly. That window is gone. Now, the second he steps into a real moment, it's a national headline, and the pressure becomes nuclear. And if you think Shedeur doesn't know all of this, you're wrong. He's been composed through it all. Silent, focused, but also patient. Dangerous patience. Because behind that silence is a player who has everything to prove, and a league full of people waiting to watch him do it. The Browns can stall. They can bury him on the chart, feed the media distractions, protect the guys ahead of him. But they're running out of time, because all it'll take is one play, one drive, one opportunity. And the Browns' most protected secret turns into the league's next headline sensation. Shedeur Sanders is one snap away from flipping the entire script. And Cleveland? They may not survive what comes next. This was never just about a young quarterback waiting for his turn. It's about a franchise so paralyzed by its past mistakes, it's willing to sabotage its own future, just to avoid risking its fragile ego. Shedeur Sanders didn't walk into Cleveland demanding anything. He didn't point fingers, stir the media, or throw tantrums on the bench. He did what young quarterbacks are expected to do: show up, work, wait. And that's exactly what the Browns are afraid of. Because through all the locker room leaks, front office panic, and strategic misfires, it's clear: Sanders might be the guy. And if he is, if he delivers on even half the potential he's shown in flashes, he exposes everyone who spent a season trying to hide him. You can delay an opportunity, bury it on depth charts, starve it of reps, but the one thing you can't do is stop it when it's ready. And whether the Browns like it or not, that moment is coming. Sooner or later, something will crack. An injury, a blowout loss, a desperate change of course. And when that door opens, even just a little, Sanders won't walk through it. He'll explode through it. And the Browns, they'll either be celebrated for finally playing the right card or roasted for sitting on a winning hand while the season slipped away. Celebrity drama, NFL drama, Shedeur Sanders, Cleveland Browns, locker room chaos, Kevin Stefanski, Browns controversy, sports gossip, football meltdown, NFL controversy, player revolt, team drama, viral sports news, NFL backlash, Cleveland turmoil, script, the fans know it, the players feel it, the league is watching. And no matter how many speeches the front office makes, no matter how tightly they hold the lid, the truth has already leaked out. So what do you think? Is it time for Cleveland to unleash Shedeur Sanders before the whole locker room and the whole fan base turns on them entirely? Drop your take in the comments below, and make no mistake, this story is far from over. The storm isn't coming, it's already here.